welcome all to this panel session. I think we had a very interesting session in the morning, and but I think this panel actually we've got quite a nice panel of speakers to actually discuss how do we develop the language AI ecosystem in India. I think one of the important things that came up in the morning was that adoption of AI, language AI is the key to actually making things work. And we've got people from very diverse kind of perspectives to all come and talk about, how, language AI systems can be adopted and what are the things that we need to do to actually make this work and at the next level. So I think the format that I'll try to use is that maybe at the beginning we'll kind of have an introductory opening statement from each one of you, where you basically tell at least what is the perspective, and what way are you associated with the language AI ecosystem, and and what do you think are the important things for making the language AI ecosystem work. And then after that, we'll basically have a set of questions. There are a few questions that I have, and then if there are questions either from the audience here or online, I trust that online questions will also be brought to me, and then we can then go through that. So I think that's how we'll do this. And maybe, we can, I don't know, just without much formality, maybe we'll just go in the order in this direction. So therefore, each one of the people can actually talk about, how they're associated with the language ecosystem, what they hope for, things to happen, and where they see, potential barriers in making things happen in Indian language AI. So that's and so it'll be fairly free flowing. So we'll take it up from there. So first, Harsh, please.
My name is Harsh. I lead machine learning at Koo. For those of you who haven't used Koo, I would urge you to use the application. It's a social media platform for Indians to express themselves in 9 Indian languages and English. We keep adding languages all the time. For us, it's very important to be part of this initiative because we use NLP technology in the broader scheme of using machine learning and AI to improve the kinds of content we can serve to our users, right? All the way from giving them content that is contextual in terms of the topical affiliation of that piece of text, whether it's entertainment, politics, business related, all the way to ensuring that the platform is safe for all our users and engaging, right? The biggest hurdle that I see in terms of as a technologist, when we go out and look for folks who have these skills, right, in machine learning, natural language processing, and general AI, it is, I think, an understatement to say that it's slim pickings out there. And especially when you want folks who can come into the industry and work on Indian language AI, it gets even worse. So for me personally, I think initiatives where, things that AI for Bharat is doing, if it can go out into the broader ecosystem amongst students and early career professionals and get their hands dirty with these technologies, I think it'll be a big advantage for industry participants like us to see more, more good quality candidates coming into the ecosystem and helping us with the projects that we need to solve on a day-to-day basis.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mani. I represent Desikru Solutions. Desikru is a rural BPO operations company. It's a digital operations company operating out of rural India. We have delivery centers employing people who have grown up in rural areas, who graduated from that ecosystem, but we make them deliver services for the top clients across the globe and India, the likes of Google, Amazon, Infosys, and so on. That's the dream of Desikru. And our language services over the years have included transcription, translation, and some of the data collection and data curation services. And if you look at the scale, we've done about 1 million words per month in translation in 18 Indian languages. But of course, all of them most were manual effort. And in the last few years, if you see, obviously the technology has come in and it's kind of been a great aid for us. But what we're hoping to get out of the entire engagement with AI for Bharat is more as a contributor in terms of creation of data sets and curation of data sets, but also how do we leverage the output of what's going to come out of this endeavor to expand our footprints. For example, today, the largest company in the ITS sector has got about 600,000 jobs. That's a big number. But if you look at the scale which we are talking about, even if you take every district, couple of people are engaged in transcription, translation, that number is huge. But we will not call them as a formal job. So that's one of the challenges we are trying to solve. How do we bridge this gap in terms of, if not the structure, but in terms of monetary abilities and the skill sets? So that's our expectation and engagement with AI for Bharat.
Good afternoon to all of you. And I definitely would like to thank Vivek, Mitesh, Pratyush, Anup for this opportunity of being in this panel discussion, witnessing the whole ceremony in the morning. And this is absolutely the right step in the current times, in the right direction. Now, as they say, never give the microphone to a professor, okay? But I'll be brief, of course. So, as I was, listening to all the presentations, witnessing the ceremony, I was transported back maybe 10 years, 5 years, when Mitesh and I, Anup and I would take long walks in IIT Bombay campus. And with Mitesh, the theme of the discussion was always, how can we leverage the work done for a resource-rich language to another language which is resource-poor? Okay, we used to call it projection. So how do you project the parameters, learn from the data of one language to another? And this was a persistent theme. Mitesh worked on words and disambiguation and applied it to many languages. Even today, when I give talks on multilingual computation, I give this cute algorithm of Marathi and Hindi helping each other through expectation maximization. And Anup's matrix of blue scores across Indian languages also always finds a place in my presentation in multilingual computation. So they are absolutely dedicated students, were dedicated students, now dedicated researchers. They will make a difference, no doubt. So now, I would like to speak the teacher's language, okay? So for me, foundations are very important. And for natural language processing, there are two pillars on which natural language processing rests. They are linguistics and probability. Okay, so this is the language I speak now. How is your linguistics? How is your grip on probability? That's what I ask. And to our research group, I gave a talk on linguistics every alternate Saturday. And the other Saturday, the talk is on probability. So combine linguistics and probability. So this is continuously done to train the students. So it is important to invest in students. The proof of that is in front of me. Anup, Mitesh, Pratyush, you are students. And investment in you, of course, pays off. So now coming to the theme of the presentation, theme of the panel discussion, AI ecosystem. Students, professors, research, publication, teaching, they are also inalienable part of the ecosystem. Okay, training manpower is an important part of the ecosystem. And this openness of data model, they are so important. We would like to make use of these data models when we teach in the class. Students get enthused by looking at systems which actually work. Just today, there was introductory lecture in my NLP course, and I sent my recording to them because I was here. And there were a demonstration of speech-to-speech machine translation, natural language generation. Okay, we are working with a movie production house who came to us to say, can you give us an AI agent which produces a script? And the script writers work on them, refine them, and their productivity increases, which was being discussed during lunchtime also. So all this goes on. And I'd like to say that AI for Bharat should really not only aim big. Aim big is a cliched phrase. What you should aim for is to create a solid foundation of language technology where models, data are absolutely transparent, of high quality, and students and teachers and researchers benefit from them. That is also a very important part of the angle. And I would like to finish by saying linguistics is the eye and computation is the body. And this is what I have believed always, and this is true. Thank you.
So, my name is Sriram. I'm with Microsoft Research in India, and in terms of background of people in our lab do work in low resource natural language processing for a long time, and you may have also they work on topics like code mixing, natural language understanding for specifically Indian languages and so on. And our company, Microsoft, has something called cognitive services, where as an API, we support many of the tasks that were described today, like translation, transliteration, understanding, and so on. So when I look at AI for Bharat's mission and this particular panel's discussion about what ecosystem we need, since I'm not an NLP person, right, I would rely on Professor Pushpa Bhattacharya's thing about we should make these things transparent. I completely agree with those. But I also think about my background is in programming languages, software engineering, and so on. So one other thing that we might think about is that even if we do all those things, even if we make the models high quality, we make them transparent and so on, how would you make them easily consumable to people who develop various kinds of applications, maybe e-commerce, we talked about payments, that's one other application. There could be many, many like that, right? So, and the people who are building e-commerce, they may have many other headaches that they have to deal with. And the fact that how can you make it convenient for them to address users now in all these 22 different languages? So I think how will you make it convenient for people, to developers in those companies, to use that? And I think there is a gap between just making the language models available and make it convenient for developers. And that's one thing I hope we can discuss. I wouldn't know how to do it, but I think that's a problem that I want to say. That's an important one to discuss here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Vishal. I'm the Chief of Innovation at National Payment Corporation of India. I think I'm the odd one here, and I would primarily look at the consumption of what these guys are doing here. And we all know about UPI, Unified Payment Interface, which a lot of apps. I think one of the key themes of why UPI is so successful is today because of the convenience. The whole experience that we give on UPI is actually very, very high as compared to anything else, right? And today on UPI, we have about 200 million users, all smartphone users. And I think these are typically well-educated, and people who are very comfortable with using a smartphone. But when I look at how do I expand beyond what we have today, and maybe take you to out of the 900 million accounts in the country, if I have to go even to the 500, 600 million, I think the only way we can do is further work on the experience part of it. And that's where I think the voice comes handy. And it's both on smartphone and on the feature phone. Because even on the smartphone today, there are a lot of people who are barely comfortable using it. They're, I think we have seen cases where people have, raised complaints to us saying it's 200 versus 2000. I wanted to send 200, but the decimal was not very clear, so they sent 2,000 rupees, right? Whereas if you look at the same experience on voice, people can really make out, okay, I'm sending 200 or I'm sending 2,000, right? So that's a experience difference that we are talking about, and that's a use case that we are trying to work upon. How do I leverage voice for payments, and not necessarily for UPI, for any payments that we do. And I think unless we get to that comfort, person who has sent this transaction wrongly will never come back on UPI. And I think if you are able to leverage voice and give that experience, I think UPI and any payment system can really get to the next level of experience, as well as we can get to the next 500, 600 million users onto the payment systems. So that's what looking at, Vivek. I think this is a great initiative. Uh, we have tried doing some of these things. We have, at our, company, we have tried building some models, doing everything, but I think we don't have, none of the businesses, have the patience to get the results out of a research, right? I think they need a ready-made product, and they want to go live with next month, right? I remember when we had the fraud, we were trying to build the fraud models, we didn't have the time or luxury to, wait for the research to happen on this, and not having data was a big issue. So I think I'm really looking forward, Vivek, on this. I think this is like the ready-made product that we can leverage and work upon. I think, and parallelly work on the digital payments penetration in the country. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Brij Kothari. I lead the Billion Readers Initiative at IIM Ahmedabad. So you already saw in the morning basically what we're doing. I think what struck me most today in the panel, in the morning's session, was what population scale problem are we solving? And I'm a little bit, I come more from the problem focus first. And then, of course, see where AI fits into that, whatever solution we can think of. So this problem definition for, at least in our case, started in 1996, 26 years ago, where I was watching as a student a Spanish film, and it came with English subtitles. Now, AI for Bharat talks about everything being on parity with what's happening in English, right? That's one of the goals for all the Indian languages. That's one of the missions. So 26 years ago, all these films came, they all had English subtitles. And English movies also had sometimes English subtitles, but nothing in Indian languages. And I think at that point it struck me that, wait a minute, if they had on any Indian language film, let's say Hindi in this case, Hindi subtitles, maybe it would do something for reading and literacy. So that was that many years ago, and then we had to literally try and prove that, does it actually work? Okay, it's an idea you saw today. I think all of you should be questioning, does it really work? Right? And once we started doing research on it for a long time, 5, 6, in fact, 10 years and more, we basically found that one very simple finding, that if the subtitles are there in the same language, so Tamil film, Tamil subtitles, the brain cannot but try to read. Try is the operative word. I'm not saying they'll succeed necessarily at the beginning, but if they have some decoding ability, they will be able to read. Please understand, I'm still not mentioning AI at all here. So then once that research was done, and once we did pilots in 10 languages across India on television, and we found that actually children and adults who watch these pro shows with the same language subtitles, their reading skills improve. So I'm just trying to give you a perspective of sometimes these kind of problems to solutions take, in our case, 2.5 decades right now already, right? Now, we have proven it in evidence that this works. The challenge, and we worked with policy. So we moved national policy at the Ministry of Information Broadcasting, and so now it's become half the content in all languages, all television channels and entertainment have to carry same language subtitles now. Now it's not being implemented. So it's one of those things, as an academic, you always learn that, oh, you think you'll write an academic paper and it'll happen. That was my impression so many years ago, it didn't. Then you move policy. Does it now get implemented? Well, no, it doesn't. So then you almost become an entrepreneur to say, okay, how do we then try to make it implementable? Now the implementation challenge, and I'll stop after that. The implementation challenge, which is where the Nilekani Center becomes so important for our work, is, I did a back of the envelope calculation in the morning today. Our goal in the next 5 years is to bring about a system change, which means that we will have zero cost after that, and the industry will take care of same language subtitling. That's the goal. In these 5 years, we will have to do, and I did the number of hours, 250,000 hours of same language subtitling in about 15 Indian languages. 50,000 hours roughly a year. The cost of that would be roughly, at how it's done today, the cost of that would be roughly 600 crores. We want to bring it down to 50 crores, and we want to speed up that entire process over these 5 years. And after that, the cost should drop to 0. Now that's the goal. Okay, so I'll stop there, but that's where I think the center and AI for Bharat are extremely important for us to be able to achieve that goal.
Thanks, Vivek, for the invite. Hi, I'm Kumar Rangarajan. I'm one of the co-founders at Slang Labs. So just to add to Professor's point, it is not just about professors should not be giving a mic to professors. Even to CEOs, you should not give a mic because we just like to talk. But I will control these things. Like in my office, nobody gives me a mic. They always say, you talk too much. Right? So anyhow, so at a very quick level, what we do at Slang, so we are a multilingual in-app voice assistant platform. Right? So what that means is like if you have an app, whether it's a big basket app or an Nike app or even a Beam app with whom we are actually working. Today, the way you have to interact with the app is by touch. Right? Use the keyboard, start typing, navigate by clicking on the menu, all these things. Why? Can you not just ask the app something in your own language and let the app react to you? Right? You don't have to think about how do I control the app. The app should just be your servant. You don't have to be subservient to the app. Right? It's sort of like how do we now invert that paradigm? So that is what we're trying to do. So we are a platform which enables these kind of experiences inside apps. Right? Even if the app is in English, you should be able to talk to it in Hindi, Tamil, Kannada, whatever, and the app should be able to react to it. And we have taken a more domain-focused approach of working with e-commerce, payments, and travel, a few domains, and making our voice assistant applicable. Right? So that's the introduction about us. So AI for Bharat, so obviously like all the technology, like NLP, generation, translation, transliteration, voice, all of that is extremely relevant to us. Right? We have been either building it on our own in some form and fashion or using third-party services, but everything that you guys are doing is extremely relevant to us, especially because of the fact that you guys are in an Indian context, and we are exactly focused in India. Right? We want to be able to solve this problem for India. And the reason we strongly believe in wanting to be able to solve this problem for India is like a little background. So I used to work in Facebook in the US. So my previous company got acquired by Facebook, so I moved there with family. Alexa came into all of our lives. So initially I was a non-believer of Alexa. Who wants to talk to a speaker? It seemed like the best idea. But then when you see how my kids and parents who are typically very hesitant to try new technology actually try out Alexa. They had no qualms in talking. It felt like, okay, voice is so much more natural. The future wants it. The past also wants it. But there is a lot of challenges. But Alexa is solving a different problem. It's trying to create a parallel ecosystem. But in India, we are a mobile-first country. Right? Most of us are using apps to be able to interact and do anything. Whether it's a productivity requirement, whether it's a commercial requirement, anything is all done through apps. But these apps continue to remain very old school, still using the old desktop era modern techniques of using UI widgets and everything else. How do we now modernize it? So that is why we want to be able to now do this. But the challenges that we have, even now as we go along, one of them is to as you said, how do you make these brands add these experiences easily? Because if it takes a lot of time for them to be able to add this experience, nobody's going to do it. Right? So how do you do it in a matter of days to a matter of weeks? And the second and most important thing, which is what we are trying to actually work with AI for Bharat, is like the accuracy part. Right? A number one problem when people today think about voice, the number one concern they have is, does it actually work? It feels very cool, it feels very futuristic, but does it actually work? When I'm speaking, do I really trust the system is actually going to recognize me correctly? Whether it could be because of my accent, like even I'm sure, I don't know how many of you understand the way I speak so fast sometimes, right? But expecting a machine to be able to now understand these things reliably all the time is going to be extremely accurate. So how do you now make that work, make it accurate all the time, so that people can start trusting this tech? I think is the key challenge in front of us, and that is really what we're hoping to work with AI for Bharat. And I think it's, in my mind, it is not just an AI problem, it's also an engineering problem. It should be a combination of how do you make it engineeringly make it very simple, solve some of the engineering level problems at the domain level, plus the core deep tech problem. A combination of them is what is going to make it work.
So what I'll do in the second round is we'll come back this way, but I'll ask a specific question to each one of you, and maybe get your feedback and some answers based on that, does that make sense? So we'll do that in this next round. My question for you, Kumar, is that two things, right? What has happened, like if you look at, look at UPI and various other things here, right? QR codes have become like, the interface of choice, right? It is something that is, everybody uses, it has gone viral, it has gotten to the next level of consciousness, right? Anybody is able to use a QR code, right? So the question is, when will, voice interfaces have a QR code moment? And that's one question I want to ask you. The second thing is, I think the kinds of things that you're doing, there's number of other companies also trying to bring voice into things. And the most common way is to have a kind of a voice bot kind of a solution. And how do you see what you're doing compared to a voice bot, and how that's something that and one of the questions is, and the third question, I might as well ask these three questions, is that you have you need obviously a very high level of accuracy and a high reliability. And how much do you think like domain-specific glossaries and domain-specific data collection, is that needed? What is your feel at this stage for that? So I think maybe I'll leave it with these three questions, and if you can try and answer.
So now I have a memory problem, so I would have forgotten all the three questions. So, yeah, but I think it's fine. So we'll start with the voice bot question first, right? I think that's the easy thing to answer, and then I'll go to the other ones. So voice bot versus in-app voice assistant. A voice assistant, like what is the thing that we're trying to do? A voice bot, from a technology perspective, a lot of commonality. There is voice to text, there is NLP, and sometimes you have to be able to speak back, and there is maybe a natural language generation also involved in there, and whatever. So all of those technology components, there are a lot of commonality. But the use case is where it fundamentally differs, and that is where we focus on, right? And the experience at the use case. So a voice bot typically is like a voice first and a voice only experience. For example, when you call a call center, as an example, that is like one place where people got the voice bot. You're calling a call center. You're not talking to an agent. Now the agent can be replaced with a voice engine. You don't need a human agent. You can actually have a voice system which recognizes that. You say whatever to it, and then there's a back and forth communication you're able to have. A completely automated back and forth voice communication that you can do. Right? That is what is typically a voice bot. Or that can be on a chat bot. A chat bot which has voice can also be called as a voice bot. These two places are what is called as a voice bot. But where the core thing is a conversational underlying, and you're using voice to automate this. What we are trying to do is like, it is not necessarily conversation first, but it is an experience, it's a visual experience that people typically do, like an e-commerce experience or a travel experience. It is not typically conversational. People don't think of it as conversational. How do you make that visual experience simplified by adding voice, by adding a simple layer of conversations, by adding a command-driven model of conversations? I don't know if that is able to now say, like, in a voice bot, it's purely voice first, right? It's voice in, voice out, everything is back and forth voice. What we are talking about as a voice assistant in an app, like in a Big Basket app or even a Beam app, it's not only voice. Voice is augmenting the existing experience of that app to do things where voice makes sense, where some cases you don't really need to, like there's a button right there. You don't need to speak, make that button. You just click and get the job done. Where it is not obvious you use voice, obviously you don't use voice. So that sort of an experience is what we're trying to do. And the second part is about making it sort of like driving the app rather than, it's not just conversational. Conversation is just one aspect of it. I hope that sort of helped clarify. The first question? QR code. Okay, that's actually what. So this is actually the holy grail you're also searching for. Like, what is that QR code mode? And I personally think, I don't know if Vishal agrees, I hope Vishal agrees, is this still like how QR code payments made QR code, and even in QR codes, I'm sure all of them, QR codes originally came out as a contact exchanging thing. Like it is supposed to replace your visiting cards, right? Originally, like it was supposed to be carrying that, it was carrying some information. The information it used to typically carry was a visiting card information. Oh, you no longer need visiting cards, was how QR code was supposed, but it didn't become popular enough. Moment it became the most simplest thing, I just need to know this person's UPI ID. Right? I need to transfer. I need to know this person's UPI ID. So what is the easiest? It's a complicated number. I can't remember this complicated number. So now can I use QR code to scan that complicated number and get the job done? Right? So one was it is a complicated use case. I can't remember the UPI number. The second thing is it is required by a lot of people. My mom also needs UPI ID. You also need UPI ID. Everybody needs that payment transaction. So it became a ubiquitous thing. So similarly, we are hoping that with this payments use case that we're doing, send 200 rupees to Nandan, the thing that you just said, which is what we're doing. Now that everyone requires. right? It's like you also require, I also require, my mom also requires. If we can make that successfully work and prove to people that tech, when people say this, it reliably works. Again, comes back to the reliability aspect. If you can show that it reliably works, whenever I say 200 rupees to Nandan, it works. And I have to keep doing it multiple times in a day or multiple times in a month. So once I start making that use case work reliably, I think a lot more use cases will follow. Is our hope. We are working on a lot of other use cases. It's not just the only use case, but we really think this is going to be that one significant use case that's going to make a big difference. Right? So that is the second part. Third question, sorry.
The third question was domain specific.
Domain specific again comes back to the accuracy part. Typically, the challenge again when it comes to voice, right? If you use a general purpose language model to be able to now resolve, like Alexa, one of the biggest problems that we all have with Alexa, as an example, like I've used the word Alexa because it's quite popular. Most of us hopefully have used that system. It's a general purpose model that they're using to be able to now handle every kind of problem in the world. Now that creates a lot of accuracy challenges, creates a lot of practical experience challenges. So instead, if you could restrict your use cases to domain-centric, it's going to make a lot of difference. Like for example, one of the problems that we have seen is like when somebody says, add 2 kg onion to your basket. Like simple thing like add 2 kg onion. Reliably getting that 2 to become 2 is not easy. Right? It after time becomes TO. Right? So now, moment you know it's a domain, now you know I'm in an e-commerce domain, the word TO makes no sense in that particular context. So we can make contextual assumptions about the problem and then replace TO with 2. Right? From a pure engineering, it doesn't even have to be an AI problem. At an engineering level, we can solve this. Right? So those are the reasons why approaching this problem as a very domain-centric problem, going domain after domain, would actually reduce the friction that exists in making people believe in this technology. Instead of trying to solve it as a one-shot, I have to solve for everybody sort of an approach.
So, Bridge, you said that there are 600 million people who are weak readers, right, in India. So now, let's say that, I mean, how do you measure, like, how, like, supposing you did same lines correctly, how many of them are helped by that? Do you have any methods of measurement? Because in the end, that is something that is critical to understand, how many people are. I'm sure it helps some people. I'm sure probably there are some it may not help, right? So therefore, that's something to understand. The second question was, nowadays, as you said, there are these, I don't know if you're familiar with products like Google Read Along, etc., which are there, where there are also methods, other kinds of approaches to solve this, fundamental literacy and numeracy problem. And how do you see those more modern approaches, right, where gamification and other things are happening to teach kids, or do you see them as different kind of markets to kind of solve this problem? And the third question was, of course, is now you are talking about a very TV-focused world. Today, large number of people are consuming content on the mobile phone, right? So how do you, what is, I'm assuming your solution works on the mobile phone as well? That's something that would be curious to understand.
Weak reading front, 600 million people, and how does SLS, same language subtitling, help them? Well, just to give you a big picture on reading skills in India, okay? If you take roughly 1.3 billion people, okay? In India, we have about 400 million people who can read very, very comfortably a newspaper. Okay? All of us here. Then you have 600 million people who are neither fully illiterate nor fully functionally literate, right? So they cannot read the headline of a newspaper, but they can also they can actually read some of the letters of any Indian language alphabet, right? Now, these people need a lot of reading practice in order to become good readers. This is where the actual challenge is. And in addition, you have 250 million people who are completely illiterate, which means they cannot read a single letter, right? So this is how the big picture is. Now, how do you firstly arrive at how do they improve? That was really the question. So Pratham's Asar studies are actually path-breaking. And they have basically shown that roughly across India, about 50% of the children in class 5 cannot read a class 2 level text. Now, typically functional reading now has become defined as at least ability to read at class 2 level, And we've done some studies at the population level. Pratham has done it for school children. We have done it at the general population level. Again, we find that over 60% of the people, actually, if you ask them, are you literate? They say yes. So therefore, they get counted in the census as literate. But if you give them a class 2 level text, they cannot read, right? Now, what we've done some studies where routine exposure to same language subtitling actually helps them advance their reading skills. And we've literally found that in populations where they got some exposure regularly over 2-3 years, in a population where 30 to 35% were reading a newspaper every day, now they're saying 70% are saying we can actually read a newspaper, right? So within 2-3 years, you start finding those kinds of responses. So one can study like that and actually determine whether that kind of exposure leads to reading skill improvement. The second question was on Google Read Along and other modern approaches. So at least in the morning, I had in my small video clip, I had mentioned that the average viewing for television a day is literally 3 hours, 46 minutes. And this has been measured. That's the average. That kind of screen time is precious if you can leverage it for something good. It's wasteful if you think that, like, oh, instead of this, you should have been reading. Right? Now we're actually kind of combining that. When you take an app or anything that is developed, you have to actually make them use the app, firstly. Here they are watching 3 hours, 46 minutes of television every day. So if you slid in reading into that, you're guaranteed that they will get reading practice throughout their life also. So is it possible for us to kind of get that kind of everyday, lifelong reading with an app? It's hard. I mean, how long will you persist with one tool like that? Now, that is not to say that it's a very effective Google Read Along. It's an extremely effective tool. It has a different purpose, and both these are complementary. Please, it is not one versus the other. They are extremely, extremely useful. Now, Google Read Along will help somebody in a more pedagogic sense where they're getting stuck at that time they're intervening, right? So a lot of AI apps can help in that space as well. So the two are slightly different, but one is effortful, the other is completely effortless. Like you're breathing. I mean, I don't have to tell you to breathe, right? You're just breathing without realizing it. Similarly, when you're watching television, you're just getting entertained. And 2 years later, you say, I can read the newspaper. What happened, right? So that's the difference. And then on the mobile phone, yeah, so we are quite device agnostic or platform agnostic in terms of where content is consumed. So our goal in the Same Language Subtitling Initiative is to make sure that all the video content that has high entertainment value, wherever it is consumed, on streaming, on television, on mobiles, should carry the same language subtitles. Now, the one thing that you have to, of course, take care of is that the subtitles are much more, I mean, you have to increase the size when you're reading them on a mobile, right? So those kind of automatic switching has to happen on the same content. But the contents, so what we're actually saying is that video, when I say video, all of you think of it as audiovisual, AV. We're saying actually we should be thinking of as AVT, and the T should automatically be the transliteration of the text. So this is just another third element in how we understand video. So therefore, the mobile issue.
And the law is also considering not just TV programs, but consumption of content on other platforms.
Yes. So what we have on TV, we have already kind of have the accessibility standards. What we're saying is that the accessibility standards should actually also be extended to streaming platforms. Because 90% of the content that goes on streaming platforms actually was all at some point or the other televised also, movies, serials, etc. Right? So the law is still to catch up, but we have now got about 100 organizations across the country who have signed on to this, that yes, we want this, and these are disability rights groups who have a problem hearing the content very well. So they have signed on saying that, yeah. So there's a fair bit of policy push that is happening along with this initiative. Yeah.
Thanks, Rich. So now we'll go to Vishal. So I think one question was, I think there are 2 or 3 questions, right? I mean, obviously, UPI is one of those big whale kind of things that if actually voice becomes successful and something like that, then it becomes something that could be very important. But on the other hand, I think that and as you said, right, there are obviously people, many people are working on language AI technologies who are building the various components and things like that, which may be very useful and things like that. But obviously, to actually have a usable solution, there are multiple layers above that needs to be created. So my question to you is that, should you let every individual startup figure out those things, or should we have some kind of a shared way of building these kinds of things, that you are leveraging things together and then they become available to multiple different, so I'm just curious, like, as I said, looking at, should there be some kind of action that happens at a combined level that enables, right? If I say every startup, you go and figure this out, it's very difficult because their core thing is something else. But this thing needs to happen, right? And therefore, you need to is there any is there a reference implementation? Do you think that would help something like this to actually get it forward? The other question which I want is that voice is kind of nice, but I suppose in the end, you will be using voice only if it is more convenient, right? And certain things it may be, certain things it may not be, right? I think that's also, we have to understand that something like that may not be the best interface for some kinds of, as you said, like pressing a button, clearly it's not the best interface to do that. But how do you, when you put it into something, how do you measure, right, that was this the right interface? Is this a place where we should have done voice, or we shouldn't have done voice in that, right? That's one question. And the other question is how important, right? And this is a fundamental question. You said UPI has 200 million people using UPI. Obviously, there is one limitation, is not everybody has a smartphone. The other limitation also may be that they may have a smartphone, but they don't know how to use it, right? I mean, so what is it that really prevents? And do you think by creating a feature phone feature, how much will you be able to increase the market or the number of people on something like UPI?
Yep. So on the first question, whether we should create a reference app, I think we followed this model and started UPI. We started Beam as a reference app. NPCI was not supposed to build an app. We were supposed to be clearinghouse, but we realized that this concept is difficult, and not many people can figure it out and invest in this, right? So Beam was first the reference app that we did, and I think a similar app can be done here, Vivek, where we can start with Beam, where we can start building this, and then see how the coming to the second question that you asked, right? It's a usage, right? I think that's the only metric, and then that can tell us, whether this is good or not, And I think what we have seen in our experience is that, it's a very, very diverse market, If someone doesn't want, they switch it off, and you just give that option to users. But a lot of people are today comfortable, and that's a research that, we have done at our end, where people are comfortable with voice more than typing or entering anything, right? And except some of the critical information, we would prefer voice, and that's a segment that is coming up. So I don't think we can generalize here, but just go as per the specification, and I think the usage will drive. And if it is not taking off, then we have to discontinue that. Sorry, Vivek, the third question I just missed.
The third question was reference app and metrics. How do you measure success? Is that?
I think it's primarily the experience which boils down to, again, what's the usage, and I think that's a fundamental thing that is the key metrics for us. Yeah, and we do have further down, like, how many disputes are coming, by channel. So we go into that, but I think primarily our high-level metric has been the usage, what's been the usage of that.
If
I can just add one point, if you don't mind. Just the thing is the with usage in general. I think because we in general, when it is a new tech, like what is the usage that is ideal is also very vague, right? Is it 50% usage, 5% usage, or 100% usage? Like what is that scale of usage needs to sometimes be defined. So I think because that is actually creates there's an expectation mismatch that happens between like what is ideal success versus what is not ideal success. So today, whatever said and done, voice is augments the experience. It's not necessarily going to replace the existing experience. So what is that, for how many people does it now making a difference? If it is making a difference for 10% of your audience, is it still worth pursuing, not worth pursuing? To start with, right? And then once you keep building the experience, then, because it's not going to start with 100, it's going to start with 10, and 10% people are reliably using it. So then we keep increasing. I think so. I know you asked for him, but I'm just saying this is the same.
I think over to you, Sriram. So I had a few questions that you were talking about and things like that. So one of the important questions that you were talking about is that, as we said, right, that there are people building models, they are building various things, and then there are the apps at the highest level, and there seems to be a gap between these two, right? How do you and so therefore, if people want to do some things, they want to kind of consume it. Really, they don't have especially if I'm talking about an app developer who's not really into this area. How do they actually, is the level of abstraction we have right now good enough, or what is an ideal way of thinking of what level of abstraction it should be, so that anybody wants to do what they want to do, how they could do it, right?
So I don't have an answer, right? But I can give a couple of examples. For example, it became quite relevant, I think, a few years ago, that any communication that you do on HTTP should become encrypted. So
Yes.
when HTTPS became the standard and so on, that was a pretty important thing. But if you just see the APIs that made adoption of HTTPS very prevalent, they required actually very minimal code changes. Right? You could actually take web services that actually used HTTP and make just very few additions.
Yes.
And then HTTPS was just there everywhere. And I think the programming model was very, first of all, there was a need that if you don't use HTTPS, you're going to get hacked, your passwords are going to leak. There was a need, but there's also convenience that was given, right? So that would be an example. So I would say, I was very intrigued actually by Slang. So I want to sort of understand what your programming model is as well. But I would say one a proof point would be if an app is actually not voice based, how much effort does it take for a developer to make it voice based? And then a corresponding thing that I would ask actually for AF Bharat would be what is corresponding effort would be to make it work on all 22 languages. Right? So I would say
that delta cost
is what I would go.
to do those things. Yes. So I want to ask a second question. Obviously there are open source efforts such as which are coming out of academia, and then there are commercial efforts. And I'm assuming, and how do you see these two work with each other, and what's a good way, right? And I think that I do personally believe that both of these are needed, right? So how do you actually, how do you see ways in which they can actually be synergistic and help each other in some sense?
So absolutely. I think research organizations like ours, right? We always believed in open collaboration, sharing data, open publication, and so on. Because when you do that, whatever investment you do, you get much more broader feedback than you keeping it in your own organization. But particularly, I think in something like AF Bharat, right? It's very clear that pooling in data is going to provide value to corporations as well. My colleague Anand Raman, he just left right now. But Pratyush, we've been talking with. So Pratyush and I are with Microsoft Research, right? But we have been engaging with the product part of our company, and there are many situations where the data from AI Bharat will actually help a commercial organization like Microsoft, because maybe we don't have actually the ability or the resources to collect as much data that AI for Bharat can collect, right? So it's absolutely, I think it's a win-win.
So, sir, I would like to ask you one question, and it's a statement which I actually had made in my talk, and I want to know whether you agree with that or whether you think. So, the first one is, what is the role of robust and diverse benchmarks really to improve the state? Because in the end, if you're not measuring the right thing, you really are not necessarily progressing in the right direction, right? So, and I mean, I just feel that putting efforts into making high quality benchmarks that truly reflect what, what we want these models to do, really, that's actually the most important thing, because once you have benchmarks that you can trust and that are trusted and people can, then actually at least people are working towards solving the same problem in some sense. So, I mean, what do you think? I mean, I think benchmarks are one of the key things to actually making things better. Because in the end, if everybody has access to the same data, and we are also working on the, there is the collaboration data, and you have the same benchmarks, then, everything we do, every incremental change, we can actually share, and the state of the art is moving forward, right? So I just want to hear that. And the second question, sir, I want to ask you specifically is that low resource languages already are kind of falling behind right here. And then when all this language AI and all these things come, they fall further behind. What is the special things we must be doing really to help low resource languages? Because I do worry in all of these things that even in India, okay, 10, 12, 15, maybe even 22 languages, 22 I'm doubtful, but still, 15 languages may be okay. But, what happens beyond that? And is that something that, we should accept? And, or what proactive steps should we take to say that, no, this is not, acceptable, and what should we do about it?
Very nice question, very important questions, but two different questions. The first question is on evaluation and benchmark. The second question is on what can we do for low resource languages. So, we should have a bit of historical perspective on this. So, you see, when Blue Score came, this was like a concealed revolution. Okay, nobody could understand that it will be so impactful. And Blue Score has been criticized to no end. It has been said that it doesn't work for morphologically complex languages and so on. Still people use it. After breaking the large, long words into segments, you can apply still Blue Score. Now, I'll take a little time on this because it's a very nice question. So, now if you look into the Blue Score, why does it work really? Okay, so when we do any natural language generation, be it machine translation, question answering, summarization, anything, you produce a string from the machine and you compare it against a reference. Now, this comparison also should be scalable, and comparison of two sentences happens at multiple levels, but two important levels are lexical level, at the level of words, and the level of structure. Okay, we are not talking about semantics, sentiment, pragmatics yet. We are talking about vocabulary and structure matching. So it has been experimentally verified through correlation studies and so on, that lower order n-grams matching, that is matching of unigram, bigram, is good for capturing phrases and word matchings. Of course, you have to account for synonyms there, where meteor comes in. But when you go to longer n-grams, it is good at capturing syntax, so structural matches. So over several years, under multiple circumstances, this evidence has emerged that 4 grams, 3 grams will be good for syntax capture, syntax matching. Unigrams, bigrams will be good for vocabulary matching, word matching, phrase matching, and so on. So Blue Score has worked, it has stayed also. Okay, so such a simple idea, you simply, match n-grams and then divided by a proper denominator to normalize these things. This works actually. So coming to this question of evaluation and benchmark, we have to create situations where the evaluation is scalable, okay? And what we are measuring has to be very clearly understood. In blue score computation, we are happy measuring syntax and vocabulary match. We are not worrying about semantics and pragmatics yet. Does it harm? Not so much, because if you pull the air, the head will come. So if you take care of vocabulary and syntax, semantics, pragmatics also falls in place. The next thing is to create the benchmark data. That was a question about metric. Here again, you have many interesting situations. When you go to text-to-speech system, the evaluation metric is mean opinion score, okay? Not blue score, mean opinion score, where this has to be manually evaluated. When you come to high-quality machine translation evaluation, you have to measure fluency and adequacy, again manually evaluated. So we see that up to a certain level, evaluation has to be done in a scalable manner, for large situations. But beyond a time where quality is important, human intervention is important. In evaluation and benchmarking, you have to bring in human beings beyond a point of time. Then comes the notion of creating benchmark data. For example, in machine translation, an important question is, are we measuring all language phenomena? Okay, so clauses, phrases, anaphora, then all kinds of phenomena. Are we measuring them? So now we have decided that, this is again rule of thumb. We have decided that if we take sentences and break them into 3 buckets, less than 10 words, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, above 30, then we hope that language phenomena are also considered. Okay, see, simple, easy to compute signals helping measure more difficult parameters, more difficult phenomena. So these kind of approach are useful, but this requires deep insight into linguistics. Okay, we have to understand language phenomena, language properties, linguistics, and the proper task at hand. That's so important. So these can possibly come from academia properly. Okay, so scalable measures of evaluation and creation of benchmark data which is faithful to the underlying distribution is the fundamental thing. And this possibly comes from academia properly, research labs also. The next question was about what can we do for low resource languages. Now here, see, I'm a person who has seen all generations of NLP. We used to do rule-based systems. After the statistical machine learning in terms of decision trees, support vector machines, now deep learning. In deep learning, if you see carefully, all we are doing is a distributed and parallel method of computing probability. Okay, maybe the researchers of NLP machine learning, maybe you will agree with me. We ultimately compute probability through softmax or whatever. Okay, so now when we come to low resource languages, until robust natural language processing systems can be created, we have to resort to rules. We have to create NLP systems which are based on rules and which are based on linguistics of those low resource languages. To take an example, suppose we want to build a question answering system for Manipuri. We don't have Manipuri data for question answering. We go into the linguistics of Manipuri, create a rule-based system, try to do some amount of computation for the task. Another point is that here again linguistics comes into play. We have to keep language typology in mind. Which languages are close to the language of interest? Maybe for Manipuri, Assamese is close, geographically it is close, but language phenomena also maybe is present in Manipuri, which is similar to Assamese and so on. So you need, for low resource languages, you have to understand the language's character and property and its personality, so to say. Create rule-based systems, do feature engineering in small amount of data, whatever data is available, create the NLP system. Finally, I'll end here. Large language models are doing absolutely surprising great things. Again and again we are seeing beautiful things are coming out of large language models. Now in large language models what happens is that the I think, saying this in the morning to Sriram, that the voice of low resource languages is lost. Large language models mix large amount of data from many languages, and the signals from low resource languages is lost. So how to listen to them in this large population? How do you listen to low resource languages? So here I believe transfer learning, understanding the distribution, understanding morphology, syntactic properties are important. So summary is that for low resource languages, linguistic help is crucial.
One of the things that we see is, right, that today, I don't know actually, I don't have a number of how many translations are being done in the country per day. But if I want to increase it to 100 times what it is today, what do I need to do? And, and I want to add that, so that what should we do to really get? Because in the end, if you really want to create a huge amount of content and in various Indian languages, we have to be 100 times what we are doing today. I mean, that's the goal that we have to look for. Second question is, we are saying, as many of the NLP researchers and everybody saying that, all our models are getting better and it's getting better and better. But the question is, how much productivity as a user are you able to get, right, by using these tools, right? And, if you are able to get a 2x productivity, what is the path to getting a 10x productivity? That's a question I want to ask you. We have to all understand, how can we get 10x productivity? Because I think that is part of being able to do 100x the number of translations. And the other question is this. If I look at a realistic, we are now becoming more from a document economy to a video economy, right? If I want to see something, do I really want to translate the document, or do I want to just convert a video? And is that, what is more important to be made available in the other language? Is it the document or is it the video? What is it? Where should we be putting our efforts, right? If there is, what is it that we should be doing to give access, right? I think the goal of this whole mission Bhashini is to actually provide access to content and services to people in their own language, right? That's the key point. And what should I be? Should I be making sure that all my videos, which to do something, right, is done? I'll take an example from Aadhaar, right? One way is to translate a document that exists in the Aadhaar website. The other way is, if someone wants to actually, say, update their Aadhaar and there is a video, make that video available in whatever language that people needs to do. So that's the question, what should you do? And then, of course, the other question is that how important is it to actually get 100% translation of a document, or do I need to understand what is it? Is it sufficient for me to understand the intent of what the person is trying to say? What part of inclusion do I achieve by getting that right, rather than just getting the exact answer?
Sure. See, one good part of being in the panel with the professors, they already have answers. So I'm going to borrow heavily from two of the professors who have converted some of these things. But I'm going to put it in a framework which is our own thing. So I'm trying to address your questions, the first two questions together, in a people, process, technology kind of framework, right? Because essentially, if you look at translation, it is not a pure process like a corporate process. Neither is a pure tech. It combines the skills, the community level knowledge, and the technology. So if you look at people part first, right? At the high end, you have, let's say, people who are looking at literature, non-fiction, Sahitya Academy novels, and all of where you combine really the human skills, which I think the machines will take a long time to catch up. I think we had a chat during the lunch as well. On the other hand, if you look at utterances, which are enabling the apps, which are transactions, voice commands and everything, you're not really looking for high-end, sophisticated people to actually do this work for you, right? But the challenge is, if you look at the population, you mentioned about the landscape not being very clear. It is not very clear because that is sort of relegated into informal network and industry. It's not even a industry where a youngster can actually look forward for a career. That has been the case. I'm sure it will change, right? Translation per se. You will see a lot of people who have worked in media, who are trying to dabble so that they can make some extra money on the sides. This is how the people, professionals are there. And disappointing thing, which when we started doing this was, we work in rural areas, right? So we always thought that English is the most difficult skill for people because it's not natural for them and it's taught. And for commercial world, you need English. But what I find today, many of our people, I'm sure I can take a poll here also in this audience, how many of us can write without error 10 sentences in our own mother tongue, native language? In India, I think that proportion is dipping pretty fast, and that's very dangerous for this segment because we're looking at really skilled people who have the native intelligence. That's not happening. And that ASS study Professor quoted, just extrapolate that into graduation. That's what we have today. So it is not that people who are already in the industry are automatically good in the skills which are required for translation. And translation, mind you, requires minimum 2 language skills. It's not good that I am good in Tamil, but I have to know English at least reasonably well to make a good sense of, and that's very tough. But how do we solve this? One of the things which we are thinking is that, again, geography helps us there. If you look at all our border districts across country, right? Naturally, people are bilingual. May not be English specific, but that's the advantage we can take. So we should now find out creative ways in which I can use the, let's say, at least if you take Karnataka for example, or many of these states, they have Hindi as a link language, and then the mother tongue is also there. So Hindi Karnataka maybe is a good option to ask, instead of I'm asking them to do an English Kannada right now to them. So there are ways and means we can work around this problem. But from a people perspective, again, there are no standard curriculum, there are no certification process to certify, because it's very contextual, translation also. So I'm just listing out some of the issues which are in the people part. But the key thing, what I'm thinking in front of solving is the scale. And you also talked about the high resource and low resource. My view is slightly contrary there. Because in the low resource areas, people will be more amenable and open for opportunities like this compared to the high density areas where the other opportunities are more plenty. So maybe a concerted effort is required from a Bhashini level or even a Bharat level, sort of special mission to address some of these low resource language on a project mode. Right, we talked about million words and million pair sentences, etc. To my mind, I think with time and effort, that should definitely be an addressable problem. It's probably one of the easiest solvable problem if we put our minds together. And of course, budgets. Budgets is when I'm referring to, Professor said, 250 hours, 250,000 hours, 5 years, 600 crores, right? So now that's not the number which we would like to accept. I'm sure we had this chat earlier also. From a cost point of view, from technology point of view, this is not something which people will accept. But then we need to figure out or help or wait for the technology to mature to bring down the cost at least by a factor of 3 or 4 before it becomes really scalable at that level. So this is on the people part. Now I just want to focus on the process part. See, process, if you look at the translation, the way it is done today, service providers or people anywhere, they do follow a few steps. And then the expectation is that if you follow these steps, the output will be as good as what the expectation of the client will be. And you have typical standards to measure the quality of process. There is even ISO standards for translation services, 1700. But they don't include, let's say, MTP kind of thing. Professor, what he referred, that's not part of the ISO standards. So if I were to define today, or if anybody has to define that who is a good translator who can consistently produce the output, not the skill part, even the output just getting sampled at certain frequency. There are no benchmarks there, there are no comparison things, because it's not matured into an industry level. So it's only still at the people who are doing it a part-time. So process level work, some standardization, definition of quality, those things can be done at the definitely policy level or at some research level that can also be helping for people to set standards there, right? Then I'll come to the technology part. So now translation traditionally had the CAT and translation memory, those kind of systems to aid people, right? So there are systems which people said that human in the loop. So you take the empty output and then include the human part and then ensure that the loop is complete. We've also tried the other way around, machine in the loop. So you take the help of the machine to give suggestions, which typically happens in even the voice-activated model, then makes the enable the human being to make decisions. Either way, these are at a very rudimentary level at this point in time in terms of the productivity, because that addresses your other question about productivity. How do we speed up? Our own efforts have not even touched 2x. If you're looking at the number in terms of productivity, so 2x is certainly not there. But when we compare what is available in the market, I can't see anything better than that as well. And of course, everybody will say ours is the best. But the technology has got a long way to go. And if that progress is fast, I think there will be a solution to engage more people. And processes, intermediate them can be easily solved. And then if we are able to visualize a network across the country, which is not very difficult, a lot of people have already done that part. Like you talked about NGOs and all of that. Young people who are skilled at their own native language plus one other language, trainable, and then they have a benchmark to look forward to, and there's a tool to help them out, is probably the picture I would like to paint. And the last question about the video. See, naturally, if you look at it from a demand point of view, we are moving towards the video content. But I would like to narrate an example from our own experience in the technical education part. When we started working with NPTEL, the National Program on Tele-Enhanced Learning, the original thought was to produce the videos of recorded lectures made available to students. So the assumption was that we don't have to sit in IIT to get this. Even people outside the system can consume that content. But naturally, for a country who grew out of studying notes, I know how many of you will remember Konar Tamil notes. All of us were relying on the notes than the textbooks, right? So it was not easy for people, especially outside the metros, to adapt to the language of professors, because even IT professors, sorry to say this, there is an accent of Bengali and Kerala, Tamil, and so on and so forth. So obviously, that time, we thought, or the system thought was that we will use a text as a supplement. So you have a video, but you also have English text, which is a video transcription which came in. We did that for a fairly long time, and it worked well because we got very good feedback from the NPTEL team and the student users, because they could relate what professor is saying to what is being read. But now if you see, because of maybe Bhashini and other initiatives, we want to go back. We want to see the professor who spoke in English. Video can be retained, even the slides can be retained. Can we make the entire experience in Malayalam or Bengali, which means S2S. So you start with transcription, then all of that you do, and then go into the video part. So in the technical education context, maybe this is the path we took. But if you're looking at entertainment, mainstream, maybe it might be a different route. But still, I think video will play a larger role.
The first one is what percentage of Ku users actually Ku in Indian languages, and how is that changing over time? I'm assuming that more people are, or that's one question. The other question was, do you think you could add like a feature for co-creating content? Okay, so I'm making a Ku in English. Now, with like a delta effort, can I also make my Ku in Kannada if that's what I want to read? So that does two things. It obviously gives us multilingual content which the person is highly motivated to be correct, as well as actually makes us a multilingual society. So you're actually doing something where it's a very small effort. I mean, I don't know whether it would work or not, but it's an idea that if we get people to try to communicate in two languages, create in two languages. Now, I've always thought about that in terms of even creation documents in two languages rather than throwing over the wall a translation. But something like a Ku, which is a very short format, may actually be a good starting point to think about how to co-create in a couple of languages. And the other question is, I think I know the answer to that I'm assuming that all Ku data is actually available, open, and can be released for making Indian for moving Indian languages forward? I think the answer is yes, but I'll let you answer this. Yeah.
So I think for the second, thanks for letting me summarize some of these points. Very interesting conversations from the panel. I'm very happy to be here. I think for the second question, that allowing co-creation in multiple languages, we actually allow that today. So you could go in and create a coup, and you can actually choose between all the languages supported on the platform. So you can write it in Hindi, English, and the other languages. So you can actually create a coup in multiple languages.
So does it translate it
Yes,
and give it to you?
it translates it, but it also allows you to correct it. Yeah, audit, correct it, or completely rewrite it.
And how many people use that?
That's a small percentage on the platform because primarily our user base is the majority of the user base is Hindi and English, with Hindi taking pole position, and then English, and then the rest of the 8 languages that we support. I think your first question was on
Content by language.
sorry, which is the most popular? I think it's Hindi right now, and followed by English. I think I already answered that. The last question was on making data publicly available. So a lot of the users on Coup are government officials, government organizations. So whatever they coup about is actually public record, right? And for other stakeholders in the platform, we're more than happy to make anonymized data sets available for various purposes within the policy frameworks that we already have for doing such things.
I think we are actually, I mean, it's a wonderful discussion, and I really thank all the panelists, and I think I learned a lot. I hope that it was enjoyable to the others as well. But I think we are way over time, so I will close the panel at this time. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.